We're gonna get started in about 2 minutes. About 2 minutes.
Okay, let's get started. So first of all, my name is John Markowicz, and this is implementing a paperless, asynchronous, blended flipped learning environment utilizing Apple, Google, and Microsoft apps for classrooms and PD. Essentially, we're going to talk about blended learning, which could be used for a flipped learning environment as well. And we're going to talk about using Apple Classroom and other Apple applications, using Google Sites, other Google applications, talk a little bit about Microsoft Teams, about QR codes, Bitly, some other things as well. So if you haven't already, please access the Google site for this PD. Here's the Bitly Markowicz, B as in boy, L, Markowicz, BLPD, or you can scan the QR code. So I feel kind of uncomfortable using a microphone, but I think I'm supposed to, so I'll do that anyway. So first, what I want to do is sort of take some space, some time for us to realize what we're grateful for. Let's take a moment, and then I'm gonna ask for people to share. And I also want to say that when I run PD for my school or at different events, I try to model PD as if I was actually teaching in front of kids or in front of my staff. So I'm gonna ask for participation at different times, and hopefully everybody's comfortable doing that. So let's just take a moment, think about what we're grateful for at this moment. Let's sort of take a couple breaths, and then I'm going to ask for people if you want to share. Okay, would anyone like to share?
Yes.
I'm thankful for the health of my children, that they are healthy and happy, and that I hope they stay happy.
Thank you, Galen. Would anyone else like to share? Galen, why don't you call on somebody else? Somebody.
Grader. Which is grading very extremely difficult math papers. I looked over and I thought, Wow, I don't even understand that. Go ahead.
Thank you for acknowledging specifically what she's doing.
Hi, Michelle. I'm thankful for having a job. I moved out here this past summer without a job, so I'm glad that I have a teaching job.
And we're happy to have you teaching in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, who else would like to share?
I'm thankful that while I was gone, I only had 2 emails from my students, and when I went on to grade their work, the quiz that they have today, they are doing quite well with it. So I am tickled pink that they got what I was presenting. I did not like the way that some of the things went in class. So I'm very happy they did very well on the test.
And what is your name?
Mary Frances.
Mary Frances, and I like how it's important to you how your students are doing, how they're achieving, even when you're away somewhere else. And Mary Frances, why don't you call on somebody else?
My name is Tanya, and I am actually really thankful to be here for, this will be like my fourth year coming to P&C, because we live in, I live in a really rural, small district, and they only pick like a handful of us, on top of, included with some administrators and the tech director. They only pick like 4 teachers every year, but because I'm actually pretty new, but I'm the computer instructor, and they're trying to build the curriculum they've sent me every year, and it's honestly a blessing, because I know there's a lot of teachers that really want to come.
Well, we're happy to have you here, Tanya. And it's good to hear what other school districts go through, and to hear that other districts might not have funding to send as many teachers, administrators as other schools, and things like that. Do you want to continue to have some gratitude sharings, or do you want to sort of move on into the presentation? All right, we'll move on into the presentation. And so this is what my laptop looks like when I'm at school. Now this is not my school laptop. This is my personal laptop. But I signed into my Apple iCloud account through my personal laptop to get access to some documents from my school. And maybe that's new for some of you guys to know that if you're using the cloud, you can transfer to different devices. So now I'm going to move over into the PD Google site that I created here, and I love Google. I'm not in a Google school right now. We're a Microsoft school. I've been in Google schools before. I really like to use Google Sites as like the hub of the resources for all of my work. I was doing it as a classroom teacher for many years, and then now I moved into a role. I'm a tech integrator. So when I run PD, I actually make Google Sites, and I create an environment just like I would with kids in the classroom. And it works well for me. I'm not going to talk about Google Classroom. I'm not going to show you Google Classroom examples in this presentation. I have links and resources on this page just because I don't have an active Google Classroom this year. So through this page, just to give you some context, I give lots of resources. I encourage independent learning, whether I'm working with staff or with students. So I like to try to inspire people to get started and have the basics, and then give them lots of information, lots of resources in many different ways, videos, links, different formats, so that they can then choose what works best for them and work at their own pace. And that's what I talk about. If you scroll down to learning models, two types of descriptors that I'll use for this type of teaching is it's asynchronous DI. So what do I mean by asynchronous DI, or what would that mean to you?
DI would be differentiated instruction, and what else did you say?
Asynchronous is something that the kids do on their own.
Asynchronous would be something they do on their own. What do you guys think about that? Agree? Disagree? Thumbs up if you agree. Okay. Have anyone else have anything else to add? Yeah. So essentially, asynchronous. Well, let's think of synchronicity. They're doing things at the same time. A traditional learning environment, right? One size fits all. Asynchronous, people are doing different things at different times. So in this model, if the learning is housed digitally on a website, and you have different resources for people, for staff and students, they can work at their own pace. They can access learning outside of your classroom, right? So whether you're a one-to-one school with iPads or Chromebooks or laptops or something else or not, your kids can access learning in class at their pace, and they can work at home, just opening up these websites. If they store their information in the cloud, they can access their files in the cloud. They can work in other classes if they have devices. So that's sort of some background on why move towards blended learning. And this is just one way to do blended learning or flipped learning. So here's a tentative agenda. You know, as a 21st century educator, you know, we want to sort of be student-centered. So we'll see where this goes. I'm going to take some risks by having people get involved, by trying to show you Apple Classroom through my iPad, through an application called Reflector 3. And we're going to try to get my iPad as the teacher iPad on one side, and then one of your iPads as a student in the Apple Classroom on the other side, so I can show you the features of Apple Classroom. Who's used Apple Classroom? Who's interested in Apple Classroom? Okay, so we'll get to that. So this is the tentative agenda, and as I sort of alluded to earlier, when I'm working with students or staff, I want it to be differentiated and asynchronous. So I encourage students to just go on their own, not listen to me. Just start accessing resources, watch videos. I bring a box of headsets to my class. The only things I bring to my class are my laptop. Well, my laptop, sometimes I'll bring my iPad and a box of headphones. That's it, I don't bring paper. So that the headphones are very important, because then the kids can listen to YouTube videos, tutorials. They can listen to videos that I've created, right? And they can go off on their own. So I encourage you to just scroll through. If something is of interest to you, if you want to multitask, all of us are very good multitaskers, for better or for worse, in this field. So feel free to just dive into something that you're inspired to do, whether it's Google Site, Apple Classroom, Microsoft Teams, Apple Pages, whatever, while you're listening to what I'm doing, and so on. So one of the things I like to start off with is to give a very, very basic organizer. So, you know, encouraging active listening. You know, anytime I ask somebody to do something, I want them to be actively learning. And for one of them, if for no other reason, some people just don't take notes, right? So this is a very basic organizer that you can use. You can download it. You can probably just download it as either a Microsoft Word document, or you might be able to open it up as a Google Doc if you're signed into Google. And what I want to do here, and we can see here that how many people are accessing this right now, just in case you're not familiar. What I want to do now is show you something that I use as a way to use a collaborative format in instruction. So what I'm going to ask is some people to come up here and put in their emails, and I'll disconnect it if you don't want to, if you want it to be private. So then what we're going to do is, while I'm running this presentation, it's going to be shared, and you can write in notes, and then throughout the presentation, I'll refer to this document, and we'll address some of these things. We'll address some of these wonderings. And again, this is a blended format where you don't need to, the traditional way would be you pause class and kids ask questions, right? Or they write it on a piece of paper. Well, here it's digital. And at any time you can just look at it yourself. Kids just throw up questions. Sometimes I do this in a Google form where people will ask questions through Google Form. I'll have a Google Form open, and during class, I'll just see what questions they are and address them, instead of asking for people to do it like throughout. So, does anyone want to come up here and put your emails in so that I can model this process?
I don't mind doing it, but I can just copy it to my drive. You can run it so that I can share it.
Well, I want it so that you guys can be able to edit it. So,
All right.
so that we can see what people are thinking throughout the session, which is what I do sometimes in class. Yeah, come on up. And let's just disconnect this for a second. And if anyone else wants to come up, please do that. And as we're waiting for that to get connected, feel free to just continue to look through some of the documents. Okay. So at least we'll have one person on it, so you can see how this works, in case you're not familiar. So the next thing I usually do, and I do this before, we don't have to do this here, but I'm showing you the process. I'll send out a form. So if I'm running a PD with staff, and you can do this with kids too, before the lesson as a pre-assessment, right? So instead of, hopefully before learning, we're giving some sort of pre-assessment. We're gathering data or information. So instead of giving a paper pre-assessment, if we want to do it digitally, one way to do it is through a Google form. So before staff PDs, I'll send out a form to find out information, right? And then I'll meet with those educators who might be interested in helping or be a part of the process. And then we design it together. So recently I did this with my staff, and we were going to do a PD on Microsoft Forms, very basic. I sent out a form. Who has experience, who's interested in working together. From the response, 2 days before the PD, we met, and then we co-designed the PD, and we co-led the PD. Which is very different than if I just went to the PD without having any information, and just sort of assumed. And it saves a lot of time. So we don't have to do this here, but let's see if anybody did it. All right, good. So we have 7 responses. So just real quick, if you're not familiar with Google Forms, different ways to see information, summary. broken down by question, individual responses, and I want to show you just a couple things. Of course, we can export it, right? This would export it into a Google Sheet. This is helpful to select email responses. So the other day I set up a form for an assistant principal, and they were doing this incentive for the students. And I looked at my personal email, and I had like 40 emails, and so did they. So I turned this off, but this is a good way to get notified. And then something else that I want to show you that some people don't see is in presentation through settings, the confirmation response. So you can actually personalize the confirmation message people got. And hopefully you saw this when you submitted the form. So one of the questions is about being a lead learner, and I kind of talked about this when I'm running PD or if I'm in class, right? Who here does something to empower students to be leaders in the classroom? Who would like to share like what you call those students, and how do you empower them to work with other students in your class? Like, for example, some teachers call them star students. What do you call them, and what are their responsibilities in the class?
Yeah, I get
They're the ones in charge of the whiteboard.
In charge of the whiteboard. So what do you mean by that?
I'm a cyber teacher, so when my kids I break them up into groups. They have to work on individually. Joe will put up his whiteboard, and all the kids work together. He's the one who takes the notes on it, and then before they come back together again, they have to decide who is going to be the one to be the speaker for the group when and if we do sharing the whole group.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to share what you do? Yes, Gail.
We do a movie making unit, and students have roles: editor, director, actor, things like that. I try not to define it too much, but because I'd like all kids to have a chance to do those things. But director is usually the person giving the directions.
All right, thanks for sharing. So, again, I do this digitally before the class session with my students, or if it's a PD with staff. I find out who's interested in being what we call a lead learner. There's this movement away from calling us teachers or even educators. We don't want to deposit information. We're all learners in the same process. So I ask who wants to be a participant in the leading process. And then for this, since I'm modeling it just like I would do in my job, and I'm not gonna go through the responses because we can just raise our hands. Does anybody want to be a lead learner? And what that means is you're somebody that's can help other people, right? You feel pretty familiar with the G Suite. You feel comfortable with maybe Apple Classroom, helping people get started with Apple Classroom here and some other Apple applications. Maybe you're familiar with Microsoft Teams, and other things like that pertain to this PD. So the question is there anyone here that would want to be a lead learner? And if so, I'd be encouraging you to stand up, and you'd be somebody, you don't have to stand up right now, but you'd be another person to help out if anybody has a question, right? So it's not just one person trying to address 20 people. So does anybody want to be somebody that could be a lead learner? And what is your name again? Deanna. So Deanna for Google, thank you. So if you have questions at all right now or throughout the session, just kind of refer to Deanna. and that she's somebody that can help you in addition to me. Anybody for Apple? Feel comfortable with Apple? How about Microsoft? Okay, no problem. So let's come back to the site. So after giving a form, sort of a pre-assessment, then I would regroup. So, how do you guys usually regroup kids in your class? Or how do you group kids in your classes? Or even staff and PDs?
Yeah.
I group staff or PD based on their interests. We have a menu of options, and they group themselves based on their interests.
Based on their interests. And what's your name? Chris. Who else would group students or staff based on interests? Pretty common. Any other way that you group? So what I would do in this case, and if you want to, that's great. If not, that's great too. But I would look to see who is focusing on a certain platform. Maybe that's one way to organize it. Maybe someone's focusing on Google. Maybe somebody's focusing on Apple. Maybe somebody's focusing on Microsoft. And then I would ask people to regroup and move around. Does anyone want to do that? What's that?
I didn't bring my laptop, so.
Okay. All right, so again, I'm also there's the content aspect of this presentation, and then there's modeling how, sort of the process. So now I want to get into some of the content. This is a Google site that's active. I'm a tech integrator, and I have 3 community project classes, which is for 8th grade. So on the home page, besides the general instructions and recognizing students, I have Google Forms. So one of them is a community project additional instruction form, which is really cool. So again, instead of one kid raising his hand and me giving attention to one kid, or them writing on a piece of paper their questions, it goes digital. So there's a Google form, and if they need additional help, I just check the form. Maybe I get to it in class. Or another option one of the options in the Google form is, do you want to work during your lunch, or during your recess, or after school? So they select when they want additional time, which day of the week they're free, and then I send them an email, and we coordinate it. So it's building accountability and responsibility, and using the Google applications. Innovative student recognition is another one, where getting them to recognize other students and giving some feedback. Then I have a tutorials page. So for every assignment, I'll make a video tutorial of myself delivering the instructions. And I say to them, this is exactly what I would do if it was whole group. But now you have it digitally, so you can pause it, you can watch it outside of class, you can rewind it, you can move ahead to another assignment, and becomes asynchronous. Who does tutorials? Something like that in your class? Yeah, anybody have anything else to sort of add to give ideas to people about using video tutorials in class?
I upload something like that, and I'll embed to be sure that they're watching them and keep track of what they're doing. I'll embed questions. Just maybe only 1 or 2 questions in the whole thing. Usually something simple, because I just want to encourage them to. I don't want them stressing out over something that they're not watching asynchronous.
And what platform do you use with questions? Edpuzzle? Anybody use a different platform with video tutorials?
I just used Screencastify, but I think WeVideo just started something with tutorials, but But I think what I try to do is anytime I make one for teachers, I really, really try hard to make it like a minute, or as short as humanly possible, because people tune out.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the general format. Every assignment has a tutorial, and in the beginning of the year, since I'm new to this school, they were very traditional. They expected paper assignments. So I just videotaped myself demonstrating what to do with each paper assignment. It's still paper assignments, but at least we're moving towards this sort of blended format. Now, one of the nice things about using the G Suite and Google Drive integration is that you can integrate with the Google Drive, and each individual document can be accessed through the site. I see a couple of heads nodding. Who uses Google in this way? Okay. Anyone wanted to add anything or say anything about what's nice about this?
I use the Google Documents within Schoology that I attach them so everybody gets a document just like you would in Google Classroom. And what I like better about Google Classroom is I can see the thumbnails of all of them.
Yep.
And I have 350 kids projects that I'm grading because that's how many are in my grade book. That's the one thing that you can't do in Schoology is you can't see the thumbnails.
Right, and that gets into like management, workflow. Last year I was at a school that was Schoology school. I was at a PD with Matt Miller, a breakout yesterday, and people were saying Canvas. A lot of people were using Canvas, and then of course Google Classroom. So we need to work with what platform we're supposed to work with as well. So for anyone that's not familiar, what you can do, and one of the video tutorials that I have on our PD page shows how to do this. One of the YouTube videos is anyone can just click on any of these documents and just download it, save it into the cloud, or work with it in Google, working with it in Microsoft Word. So it really transforms the learning experience where the accountability is put on the students. You can upload all your documents, and it's there. We had a paper textbook. It's funny because Matt Miller has ditched the textbook, right? So I was given a paper textbook for class at the beginning of this year. So I just made it digital. I scanned every page, made it a PDF, put it on the website, and now everybody's got access to the textbook.
Copyright issues there?
That might be a good question. I didn't think about that. Is that a copyright?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I should probably take that down.
Unless everybody already has one, and that's their actual.
So as long as everybody purchased one, they can have. Okay, I get it. Thanks. So this is an interesting site to look at as well. I'm just going to breeze over it for time, but it's a little different. This was a Google site I made when I was a technology teacher many years ago, and this is in the classic sites. And it's just a different way to organize it. So it's using links for all the projects. All the projects were listed for each grade, and the kids just came in and they just worked they just went from project to project, and they worked at their own pace, and they just showed it to me when they were done. They were working 100% of the time, bell to bell, every single class. And I spent a lot of time outside of class, right? Finding tutorials, making my own tutorials, or doing loads of screenshots so that in class, everything they had was there. So you guys have that to see as well. All right, so are you interested in seeing some sites about PD with Google Sites? Are you interested in seeing some Google Site samples with using for PD, or should we move past that? Move past that, all right. So then on this site, some resources for Google Classroom, for Google Forms, setting up the file cabinet, and some other things. So let's get into Apple Classroom. So for this, I'm going to need somebody to volunteer. And what we're going to do, what we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to use my phone's hotspot to connect the laptop and the iPad, and we're going to use the Reflector 3 app to have this Mac serve as a smart TV so that I can show you how Apple Classroom works. So would anyone like to volunteer to use the iPad as a simulation in this exercise? I would need somebody's iPad to be hooked up to my hotspot. Yeah, so come on up, and this is going to take a minute to connect. All right, so please go to settings. Yep, we're going to go Wi-Fi. And we're going to John Markovich. John Markovich. Yep. And then go to your control center and go to screen mirror, and John's MacBook Air. We try yours.
Sure.
You want to just go?
No.
We'll do that. Let's see. Okay, so let's connect to my personal hotspot through Wi-Fi. John Markovich. Where at?
Where is it?
Chester County.
Oh, Chester.
So let's just have.
Alright, so this is what we're going to do. I can't get their screens to be reflected on here, but we'll just kind of go through the process. So on your iOS device, use Apple Classroom, and so I can't open Apple Classroom on this Mac because it's an older version. So that's why I'm running Apple Classroom on the tablet. So when you open up Apple Classroom, which is a free app if you're not sure, what you do is you invite students. So do you guys have, if you guys could open up Apple Classroom in your settings, it should come up. Yeah, so I don't think it works with a smartphone, but it works with a MacBook. So if you have a laptop, MacBook Air, or an iPad, you should be able to go to, here I'll show you, if you go to settings, you'll find Classroom, and then you click on Classroom, and then you'll be able to join the class.
Is Apple Classroom free?
Yeah.
Can you manage iPads with Apple Classroom?
Oh yeah, it's designed. It's really designed for iPads, and it also works with laptops, MacBooks, MacBook Airs.
Is there a code?
Let me. Which are you guys on the attendee network?
Yes.
All right, so let's try. Let's see if this works. Sometimes you have to be on the same network for Apple Classroom to work. All right, so it's not working. So let's we'll sort of abandon this idea. All right, so I don't want to take any more of your time. Thank you for those of you who are trying to assist.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So you usually need to be on the same network for Apple Classroom. And we were trying to do some things with screen mirroring, but in the classroom, you're on the same network. You use either your Mac or your tablet. Apple Classroom is a device management. It's primarily for device management. And you can open up applications on any device that's connected. You can open up apps. You can navigate to websites. You can open up websites on any devices that are connected. You can lock screens. Teachers love that. I don't. You know, there's other ways to encourage students to be on task. And you can airdrop. So you can airdrop assignments from your device to students through Apple Classroom. I think that's one of the really great features of it. I was hoping to be able to model it for you here, but we couldn't show that. So I made some YouTube videos for my staff recently. Feel free to watch that at some point or to access different resources. If how many people have iPads in their schools that they're able to use? Okay, so if you have iPads or MacBooks, I strongly encourage you to check out Apple Classroom. So let's move on. And then there's some other resources on iCloud computing using drives, notes, the process that I go through. So when Apple Classroom doesn't work for certain devices aren't necessarily connected to the classroom. So then what I'll do is I'll open up a document and I'll airdrop it. So I'll be able to airdrop an individual assignment to students if they're not in the classroom. If that doesn't work, I'll email them. So then I'll email them the assignment, they'll open it up on their device, and then sometimes I'm encouraging them to use a document such as like an Apple product, like Apple Keynote, or Pages or Numbers, and at my school they're used to Microsoft. So if the app isn't installed on the device, then I'll just download it into a Microsoft equivalent. So they can still get the same project. If I was doing an Apple Pages assignment and they don't have the app on their device, then I just download it into Microsoft PowerPoint or Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word would be the equivalent, and then I just send it to them that way. Different resources for different Apple applications. So then we come to Microsoft. Any questions, comments about what was covered so far? Okay, so then there's Microsoft Teams. So when I came to this school, in full transparency, I said to the CEO at the beginning of the year, I was like, can we work with Google? You know, can we work with Google Classroom? She's like, our kids don't have Google accounts. So I said, well, can we get maybe a pilot classroom with some teachers that want to use Google? She said, nobody's to use Google. So I was like, all right. So I checked out Microsoft Teams. Who has used Teams? Any comments, thoughts about Teams?
Just getting started with them. So I'm going kicking and screaming from Google. We're in the whole school transitioning to using Teams. So but I'm learning.
Yeah. So essentially Teams didn't work for my situation. Teams has a lot of really interesting features. It has a lot of interesting features that I would encourage you to look into if that's your situation. But it didn't work in my school. We had connectivity issues. Sometimes the apps wouldn't load. Microsoft Excel never loaded. And eventually kids couldn't really access it, which was a shame because Teams, it's automatically connected to OneNote. There's a class notebook that opens up. There's a thread where you can comment. There's discussions. You can create channels. You can video chat through Teams. You can just regular message chat. So it has a lot of nice features that's there. It didn't work for my purposes. So then I have some resources. I shared Microsoft Forms, if that would be helpful. Flipgrid, which is a Microsoft product now. And then along the same lines of blended learning, you know, when you're sharing websites or resources, if you're doing it in this format, is using QR codes. QR codes are very, very popular, becoming very popular in the classroom. And along the same lines is using Bitly. Since we have some extra time not being able to get into Apple Classroom, let's talk briefly about QR codes. Who's using QR codes in the classroom? Who wants to share? Who loves QR codes, using QR codes? No? Does anyone want to share how you're using it to give ideas to people? Yeah, Gail.
We do book trailers, and we take we upload it to Google Drive, and we create a QR code of the book trailer, we put it into the actual book in the library. So then when the kids go book shopping, there's like, they have these iPads there that they can book shop with. And so if they were using that and they found the QR code, they can boom, take a picture of it. You know, it'll send it to the trailer that the kids made. So it's almost like a little scavenger hunt. It's kind of cute.
And so for anyone that's interested, so you have QR codes that you set up, the actual printed QR codes on a piece of paper throughout the library.
Right? No, it's in the book.
In the books in the
Pull it
library.
off the shelf.
Oh.
You know, it's like instead of reading the back, they see the QR code and they go, oh, and they watch the video the kids made. The QR codes, the videos, they're just on Google Drive. It takes up room, but they're on my drive. They make it in video, and then I import it. No, wait, no, it's not on Drive. It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. It's on my YouTube account. That way it doesn't take up any space. That's what I do. And I use that as like a teaching tool. Like I set up a channel of all these trailers. They all have QR codes built onto it.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was at an Apple Distinguished School, Chesterbrook Academy, Westchester, Pennsylvania, a couple months ago. And my big takeaway is QR codes everywhere. In the hallways, on the displays, they were interactive with QR codes as well as the print media. So you could walk by, scan the QR codes, hear the students reading what they're talking about, or a video showing them explaining. So interactive bulletin boards through all the halls. In class, you would go in class and there would be centers. So instead of a teacher explaining how to do something, they scan QR codes that link to YouTube videos with instructions on how to do things, or they QR code links to a website that has resources. So, you know, when I think of blended learning broadly, you're blending digital with traditional. And QR codes are quickly becoming a really, really popular way to have kids access websites, videos, media, building accountability asynchronously, and freeing you up if you're an educator to be a facilitator and see those things. Bitly, who uses Bitly? Yeah, so Bitly just a way to shorten URLs and track with data. And that's pretty much the presentation. When you create a blended learning format, it could easily be transferred into a flipped format, right? Where the kids or the staff are expected to access the learning completely outside of your classroom. Does anybody do flipped learning? Anyone want to share? Yeah.
So we're doing it with our administrative team. So our superintendent has flipped the administrators' meetings. So it's flipped. So we do all the reading ahead of time, and then when we're all together, we can discuss what's going on. It was her idea of doing what we're practicing, what we're trying to teach. So it's made the meetings 1,000 times better because it doesn't pertain to me, or half doesn't pertain to somebody else. Elementary, high school, don't have a discussion about things that most important.
So having staff PD flips so that you access it on your time, and then you come to meetings in person, having access to the information, and just talking about what's relevant to you, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts about a flipped environment? Okay, we have about five minutes or so left. Any questions, comments, thoughts, anything you'd like to share?
talking about self-pacing the kids. I've got a lot of kids who self-pace to basically a dead end. You know, you don't even know it's there because they're moving so slow or not moving at all. Granted, this is a cyber school, things are a little different. Do you have any, suggestions on how to keep kids, just, what do you put in there each day that attracts the kids to look at?
Yeah, so the question is for the kids, if you're expecting them to be self-paced and they're not working at the pace that you expect them, how can you intervene? How can you engage them to work more quickly or up to grade level, something like that?
Just to get them, what kind of things have you put to, so when they log into their site or your site each day, there's something for them that piques their interest, that they, like, I'm curious. Every day I want to check into Facebook because I want to see what my friends put on. What do you do to get your students to want to log into your?
So one idea, and then I'll throw this out to you guys. 2 years ago, I was teaching high school STEAM, North Philadelphia, a school where kids had historically underperformed, and we were supposed to come up with a STEAM curriculum, and we were one-to-one Chromebooks. So what I did was, through Google Classroom, I would find concepts connected to like sports. It was STEAM and it was physics and algebra based. So and this is probably something you've done, but I would add content that was connected, that was relevant to them, to hook them. And that was a lot of work on my part. I had to find it, but that's one thing to make things engaging. Another thing is that getting students to create content, building an environment where students will create content. Then you post their videos, their tutorials to the page. Other ideas you guys have to hook kids, to engage kids. All right, well, thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. I'll be here for a couple more minutes, and I hope you have a good rest of the conference.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
She's just happy to have a job. Way to go.
Not much right now. I'm just trying to keep trying to put it on there. But I was out today and my coworker just spoke classroom, so their lesson was just on YouTube and they did it with the stuff. I've made like my own things and have them like do certain things on Desmos, but I haven't I know like what you're talking about.
Okay.
Mhm.